Could you talk a little bit about how Home Alive started?
It was 18 years ago. A lot of the stuff that you're asking about happened. Sometimes there's little bits of revisionist history.
In 1993, there was a distinct energy in Seattle that was happening. And I think that it's just one of those special time periods.
In the early 90s, the music scene in Seattle was at full throttle. Most of America thought of it as grunge, a particular set of bands dominated by guys, led by Nirvana, of course. There was a huge commercial breakthrough for Nirvana, and also bands like Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains.
I don't think grunge was happening in Seattle. That's just my personal opinion. Grunge was something that, somebody at JCPenney corporate headquarters or someplace, invented in order to sell plaid shirts.
It sounds so silly to even say grunge. It sounded so silly then, and it still sounds silly now. It was just that many people there doing like-minded things, It wasn't even that it was artificially imposed upon us.
But at the same time, there was another thriving scene in Seattle, one that I always found actually, in some ways, I hate to say more passionate, but to me sometimes it felt more passionate than the more famous scene.
We were predominantly all creative people, and if not creative people, people who hung out within that scene, right? So there were these places that were just like our community and our scene that was like, the youth culture of that moment in Seattle.
I did freelance photography, and when I lived down in Pioneer Square, I lived in a loft full of artists, and so, I was around a lot of artsy people, some of which were in the music scene, some of which weren't.
I was a bartender at the Comet Tavern, which was a home for a lot of people. It was a big base for the music scene, the music community.
I was playing in a band called Maxi Band. I lived in a house with a bunch of musicians, and I went to shows a lot.
I could go out every night of the week and listen to music, or go to somebody's house and listen to some music. It felt really special.
I had just moved here.
And was playing music in a couple different bands, writing, doing some spoken word performance.
Those days it was about hanging out and listening to music and making art and pretty much living to support your music habit that was never bringing any money in.
And this scene was led by the Gits and Mia Zapata. This all predated Riot Grrrl, and it had a different spirit. It wasn't as ideologically focused. It wasn't as clearly political. And yet, these women were embodying a raucous, sexual, sensual, rebellious power. They were redefining what it meant to be a woman in rock, to be a woman who rocked. Mia Zapata was really at the center of that.
My favorite band at the time, the one that really spoke to my heart, were the Gits. And that was because Mia had so much soul and character and strength too. She didn't take any shit from anyone. Before it was, I'd go see these punk rock bands with all these guys, and maybe I would dance, or maybe I would stand there and hold a jacket. I felt like kind of confined a bit to play a role. And when I saw the Gits, I didn't have that role anymore. If I could put a label on it then, I would have called that feminism.
It seemed like about half the graduating class of Antioch College of 1989 moved to Seattle.
Didn't have any design on playing music when I went there, but it was kind of in the air, everybody was really fired up to be doing it, and there was just a lot. It was a very fertile time, and it was pretty inspiring. And the Gits were really inspiring, and we all lived together in a house called the Rat House. And I met through that whole scene, what ended up being my future bandmates in a band called 7 Year Bitch. And we got our start because of the Gits, quite frankly.
The Gits were beginning to take hold nationally, and the Seattle music scene was taking off nationally, just like any band from Seattle. There was a cartoon once that like showed these record executives running down the streets of Seattle, like trying to find people and giving them money and contracts, record contracts to be a Seattle band.
I mean, the 90s were great in some ways, but they also really sucked in this region. There was so much violence and drugs, and a lot of people were dying in that scene.
Back in the early 90s, Seattle was a darker place. It just felt darker.
I started getting phone calls like every 6 months that another friend was dead. And it was either a car accident or motorcycle or accidental overdose.
We had a second round of mourning and celebrating Stephanie at the Comet Tavern, and Celine and I were hanging out with her at the corner of the bar. She gave me a big hug and a kiss, and I think she licked the side of my face and said, you know, something Mia, whatever, and then she went off into the night, and that was the last time that I saw her.
In September of 1993, the city of Seattle, located in the evergreen state of Washington, reported 57 homicides. On July 7th of that year, an unidentified woman was found brutally raped and strangled to death. Her name, Mia Zapata, singer for the local band, The Gits.
I came to Seattle after Kurt Cobain died to do a piece for the Village Voice. And I expected to find a city in mourning, and I did find a city in mourning, but what shocked me is that it was in mourning for someone else. Mia Zapata's death affected the local scene almost more profoundly than Kurt Cobain's did. I don't want to underestimate the effect of Kurt's death or the importance of him and of Nirvana, but Mia was here. She was here every night. She was out on the streets, in the bars. She was playing and performing, and I found this giant hole ripped in the fabric of Seattle rock.
So this career was moving these ideas and all this fun and sort of success, and music was being generated. And then it was just like abruptly halted by Mia's murder. And we could continue as a band, and we did. We thought to honor Mia, we'd go on as a band.
It's hard to go back to like where all that was, but it was just the part of getting over the mourning of it, and just like the loss, just the fact that she was gone. And then once we started to find out more about what had happened to her, I think that's when the seed was sort of set in me about what to do about it.
Mia's death affected me pretty profoundly, as it did many people.
I didn't know Mia well. I had seen her play a couple of times, and she was good friends with a good friend of mine. But regardless, you know, I was devastated when I heard about this. No matter who it happens to, it's terrifying.
I think following Mia's death, I think the community at large, whether or not you knew her, I did not know her, but I'd seen her play before. And I think people were just incredibly alarmed by the fact that, you know, this really strong, courageous, outspoken, ballsy woman could be murdered. And, you know, in my case, I kept thinking to myself, how does someone like that get murdered?
To me, I just always looked up to her and idolized her so much, and she was so street smart and savvy, and kind of a force to be reckoned with herself, you know? So that somebody like that could have this happen made I think it hit home for all of us.
I was not close to Mia, but very much into that music scene, and I'd just gone to the Comet the night before, 2 nights before, so it struck home.
Like, our friend is killed, we don't know if it's somebody, you know, around in our community. While we're doing this, we are constantly being inundated and reminded that people are not making it home, and when they're home, they're not safe.
it made so unavoidably apparent that it was possible that something like that could happen at all and could happen to us and did happen to her. And it made all of it so incredibly visceral. There was a real sense of horror that had entered our lives.
And the police were not letting information out that we felt was important to get let out, namely that she was raped, because the guy was still out there.
We were being told that it could be somebody that we knew. We were having friends that were getting semen samples taken off of them.
The feeling, just walking into the bar, changed because everybody in that bar had some kind of relationship to that reality.
It was bad for us because you'd be sitting there in the bar drinking a beer like, was it one of these people? Like, how could that be?
That bar was never the same. The collective spaces that we were in were never the same. The sense of trauma, I can remember, that makes me want to cry.
We had no idea what happened. There was a lot of upheaval and just raw fear and anger and rage.
And wanting to transform the anger and the rage as a static feeling of helplessness into some sort of action like, this will not happen again, this will not continue, we will not allow it to continue. I don't want it to happen to another one of my friends, I don't want it to happen to me.
And really wanting to not stop living our lives. Like, I know a huge piece of that was like, I still want to go to shows. And a lot of the messages out there were really about fear and about like closing down and like not doing these things. And we're like, no, I don't want to do that, but how do we not collapse in fear?
I mean, I started thinking about things of like, oh, you know, did she have a way of defending herself? If she had, would it have helped her? And not to put any kind of blame on her or do the blame the victim thing, but just like, we didn't know shit about her circumstance or what had happened. Nothing. I didn't know what we were gonna do. I just knew we had to do something.
After Mia was killed, Valerie was on tour and she called me. I was working at CZ and she said, when I get back, I want to get together with you and I want to talk about getting some kind of self-defense for our friends.
And then when I got back to Seattle, called Greta, called Jessica, and a bunch of other people, and they called a bunch of people, and we ended up having some meetings at my house.
The initial meetings that happened were packed. There were probably 30 or 40 people that showed up at some of these meetings, and people were pretty pissed off and scared, and there were men and women, and the thing that struck me is that it was really solution oriented because we didn't want to get shut down as artists or individuals.
I think we all got together with the sense of what the hell's going on and what are we going to do about it, and that could have been me, and we were all just really frightened and we wanted to kind of come together and make the community a safer place to live, especially for people that, you know, didn't have a lot of resources to take, you know, $600 self-defense classes and stuff like that.
We can't afford it. There's a lot of other people who can't afford it, and that shouldn't be the stopping block.
So in 1993, when you were a woman and you had just been beaten or you just been raped or you were frightened or you wanted to leave a domestic violence situation, would you pick up the yellow pages? Call 911? There were a lot fewer options.
Mia was murdered and we didn't just go away. We came together and said, what are we gonna do? And how can we, what do we have to do to take care of ourselves? We don't know what it means to be safe in this environment right now. Let's try to stick together and figure this out together.
It culminated around Mia's murder, but a lot of people, brought their own pain and experiences and grief and trauma into the room and began conversations around like, what do we do with this rage and this pain? It's too much.
That what had happened to Mia sat on a continuum of all of the different kinds of violences that we do experience, had experienced. It gave a completely different lens to what violence meant and what it means to take care of ourselves.
There was so much energy in that room when we met. It was destined to continue and grow into something. And so we just continued to meet. The core group kind of happened organically. It was just the people who decided to keep meeting.
That was probably the latest addition to the group. I was working at the same pizza restaurant that she did and Christiane. And just as Christiane began talking more and more about Home Alive, I realized it was something I really wanted to be a part of. We
talked about what is this going to look like, and it was never like, let's start an organization. It was never that.
I think the name came up first, and I remember Jessica drawing it out, and she was just like, oh, something like this, and everybody was like, oh yeah, that's great.
But we also didn't call it Get Home Alive because that we also wanted to focus on that so much of the violence happens in homes, and sometimes when you're home, you're not safe.
The stenciling happened after that, because I think we used that particular logo, Home Alive, how are you getting home alive tonight, within our first political action, because we just went out and spray painted all over Capitol Hill.
That kind of guerrilla art was happening. It was all about awareness.
I remember us going out and saying, writing things like, how are you getting home alive? And I think we chalked like the outline of bodies. And I remember the side of the Comet used to have like a huge mural space, and we got the graffiti guy to like create this beautiful like home alive mural.
There was this demolished building, this construction site downtown. I think it was on 2nd Avenue, and there were rebars that were sticking out of the building. And I know that 2 people went down there at in the middle of the night, and they hopped the construction fence, and spray painted legs, like open legs, so that it looked like the rebar was penetrating these legs, and then spray painted rape statistics. It was a big part of what we were doing, was create awareness about staying safe and to be aware of the types of violence that is happening.
My recollection is that we were first focused on ourselves and our immediate community, because we didn't know if this person was still out. We didn't know who he was. There was fear in the community that it was somebody that we knew, and just it makes you feel very vulnerable.
There was a place inside of us that knew Mia had fought like hell, that she would have, that she did, that she must have, and that we would too.
Let's, raise money, like have a show, raise money, and bring this dude up from San Francisco in the suit.
And it was the full suit, full contact self-defense. I think where you had to get, charge at the person, and a very intense thing to do. And it was the first time for me, and I think for most of us. And we were like, okay, this seems like a good organization. They seem like they know what they're doing.
That was really the beginnings of Home Alive. It was, let's do this one show. And we did do that one show. And it got a lot of press. It was at Rock Candy.
Found out later the dude was sleeping with his students. We were like, what are you talking about? That's totally unethical and crazy, right? So we were really offended by that.
These classes don't really reflect the depth and complexity of what we're thinking about when we think of violence and safety.
And that's when I remember us just being like, fuck it, we're just gonna do it ourselves.
When I heard about Home Alive, I wasn't living in Seattle, but it totally made sense to me that a group connected to the kind of music that was coming out of the city would be about throwing a punch and learning how to block, because that's what the music did. The music was in your face, it protected listeners with a wall of sound, it confronted them in the same way that you would confront someone who was attacking you. That music was self-defense. So it totally makes sense that Home Alive is a self-defense organization.
Self-defense is not only physical, it's such a huge range of things. And we started realizing, okay, we don't only want to learn one type of self-defense, one methodology from one school, from one philosophy, from one place. We want to provide a space where we can teach ourselves and learn and provide for other people and invite other people to come to the things that we're setting up, of just the broad range of what does this mean. What the hell is this self-defense thing, right?
So through conversations around what does self-defense mean, but also what we want it to mean, and a lot of the information that was out there, like I said, was really fear-based and really about do this, don't do this. They kind of had a really victim-blaming kind of framework, and also didn't necessarily reflect our lives. And so we just began pulling in martial artists, boxers, people that did Wing Chun, and we started training ourselves and developing curriculum, pulling from what we knew from organizing work, what we knew from domestic violence, and what we were learning around martial arts and self-defense classes, and designed our own curriculum.
The first self-defense class that I took was just such a transformative experience, Because for me, it really wasn't about being able to punch or being able to kick. It was just the concept that I could say no whenever I wanted to.
We would draw a figure on the board and then have people say things that they've heard about what you need to do to keep yourself safe. And so you'd have this figure surrounded by all these messages.
It's like, stay out of certain parts of neighborhoods. You're like, really? I live there. Like, not gonna be helpful. You know, or like, lock your door. And I'm like, actually the people, you know, that I know that are trying to figure out how to be safe, when they lock the door, the person that's hurting them the most is their partner.
When somebody tells you, well, to be safe, you should go home before dark and always have a man walk with you, and thought that was just complete bullshit.
It is very judgmental. It blames the victim, so to speak. If something were to happen and you were wearing a skirt, for example, that reinforces the idea that it was your fault. You didn't follow that rule. And we said that's ridiculous. You should be able to wear what you want, go where you want. It wasn't Mia's fault that she was raped and murdered because she had been out drinking.
You're worth defending. Do as much as you can to figure out how to defend yourself.
What we were trying to do was not take care of everybody else and be like out of ourselves, but we were actually trying to just figure out how to have personal responsibility and deal with the other major thing is we were dealing in an environment in a city, small city with a small community where there was a predator on the loose.
It wasn't just physical self-defense that we were interested in, but also the ways that we set boundaries on a daily basis.
To look at the spectrum of violence all the way from verbal abuse or even body language, whatever, all the way to murder.
It was empowering people to take care of their own bodies and to know that they were able to do that and to take care of themselves in a very specific way. And it was also at 24 something that was new to me. I mean, I, as empowered as I thought I was, like, you know, learning to use my voice and learning to use my body in all these brand new ways was super new.
It was pretty life-changing for me internally. I can remember, we did some practice punches and we did sounding with it, and I was kind of a meek, quiet person, and so to be yelling no and punching something, it just it released something in me, and I remember I just started crying and I wasn't sure why. It was just this emotional release of hearing my own voice be forceful.
Like I felt like I was choking on my own voice, and by the end I was screaming my head off.
It taught me that it's okay to embrace my own strength and have that power, that empowerment, you know.
One of the things I felt most passionate about in regards to the self-defense classes that we did was really dispelling the myth that if you fight back, you're putting yourself more in danger.
And the number one priority around that is that people know that they're worth defending and that they can do these things before attacks, these things during, these things after, and this is all around taking care of yourself, and that the main thing is that they are worth it.
We were trying to break down this myth of the stranger, that violence against women only happens from some tall, dark stranger.
People come and expect this class to be all around stranger violence. And that's what most self-defense classes that I've ever seen were all about. People walk into our class and we'd start talking about domestic violence and dating violence and partner violence, and all of a sudden, like, that dialogue was different. And people are like, just kick him in the, you know, whatever, and kick him here and do that. I'm like, well, what if you love this person? Like, that's a different dialogue. How are you going to respond when it's the person you love that's hurting you?
The violence that happened to me in my life was by people that I knew. And so what if I had some skills? I wasn't gonna punch my stepfather in the face, you know? So what if I had some other skills? And so we really broadened it out, not just to boundary setting, but all the ways that we take care of ourselves. That anything that you do to take care of yourself, feel good about yourself, feel strong in yourself, is going to make you safer.
That self-expression and the right and ability to express ourselves is inseparable from our ability to take care of ourselves, to set boundaries, to put ourselves out in the world, to take up space, to be present, to defend ourselves, to fight back. All of that was really clear for us at the time, I think.
shit, we were offered self-defense classes in every imaginable size and shape. You know, they just came off the street, I can teach this class, and we're like, yeah, come on in, you know, teach the class. So, I mean, that was the crux of Home Alive right there. The fact that we said, anybody wants to offer a self-defense class, we're into it. You're into taking that, you know, knives, bottles, and chains class, come on in and take it, you know, and that was a real, and people were into that. And then there's people, you know, that carried a Glock and wanted to do a gun class.
There was a question of learning how to handle guns and gun safety and shooting guns, because once you get into this conversation, guns are going to become a part of it. So we ended up providing like gun safety classes, some that were provided by the NRA of all places, and then some that were provided by a former Black Panther of all places, right?
But at the end of the day, we're like, well, who the hell are we going to, you know, to decide what kind of self-defense class they should take?
We're not trying to say every woman should take a self-defense class. We're trying to say this is something that we believe should be accessible to everyone.
And that was like, to me, that's the most important aspect of Home Alive, is that we didn't decide for anybody. We opened the door, we offered a wide array of classes, and people came, and it was amazing.
There was an active irritant in the community, and not just meaning in Seattle. There was lots of perpetrators of violence, lots of predators in Seattle, and still are. It's what, the serial killer capital of the fucking country, right? So not news to us. Again, we have to remember that they thought, the police force thought it was probably somebody that we knew. It was probably somebody that was very close to Mia. I mean, that's a lead, that's a theory that they followed for a very long time. So that was palpable in the air for us, and every fucking time we sat down and had a meeting about it, that was palpable.
How do you support responding in the immediate moment while also like having a plan for, let's figure out how to have the conditions in which sexual assault doesn't happen? It's awesome. That also, to be able to imagine that, it takes art. It takes music, and so that was threaded into the work that Home Alive is doing in ways that people are actually expressing, surviving, but also imagining liberation.
We started out with that music show, but there were visual artists in our group, and Jessica and Stacy. There was a feeling of like, let's have this art auction, and then the evolution of, it's not just music, but it's visual art, and it's like whatever.
I think that was really important, that we all had a creative spirit, and I think along with that comes sort of a natural defending yourself in what you're creating.
People in the community that were friends of ours and friends of Mia's didn't necessarily agree with Home Alive. I mean, there was really good friends of Mia who still don't agree with what Home Alive did. I think they felt that we were kind of turning her into a poster child, even though they tried to be as supportive as possible. And I was like, yeah, I understand and I hear all of that, but this is why we're doing it, because we're trying to make sure that this doesn't happen again. It's become this thing that's bigger now than Mia and Mia's case.
I think it's really important to clarify that the organization was started, and I think we get a lot of fire from the fact that it was selfish. It was an individual decision. It was a decision that was based on our needs at the time. It wasn't something that it was like, I've got a great idea. I'm going to invent this organization
and protect the world.
And protect the world. It was like, we were scared to death.
Early on, a decision was made to become a collective. And our version of collective meant consensus-based, which meant everybody had to agree, or everybody had to say, I will not disagree. And that is really a gigantic pain in the ass.
I think when we started this organization, it felt like we all came from the same community. It felt like we had so much in common, and what we had in common was, you know, we came together through a loss.
People have their own stories and the stuff that they were coming to it with. You know, how do you do all of that? And, you know, and learn how to take care of yourself and provide something for other people and work well together with other people and create an organization when you're a fucking artist, you know, like what kind of business skills. I mean, thank God Laura was there.
And, you know, if you looked at it like a Venn diagram, there were 9 of us. There was a lot of overlap, and those are the things that we successfully, executed.
When you work in a consensus mode, it's a great thing, because at the end you all feel like, wow, we made the right decision, we made it for the right reason.
The 9 of us would understand we all had jobs, or 3 jobs, or going to school, or relationships. So of course we'd get very frustrated and tired and bicker, and some things we would just never really agree on. We'd have to agree to disagree.
And meetings sometimes got out of hand, but I mean, in the end, it was sort of like we would all shepherd each other back. Okay, let's pull it back, you know.
Working in a group of really diverse, strong-willed women who initially everything was consensus-based. Consensus in a room full of completely like people is tough. But when you're talking about finding consensus among a group of very strong opinions is a bitch.
The problem isn't consensus. The problem is consensus in a context in which there isn't already something that's shared.
But there's a part of it that was also just completely insane, like the consensus process of having like 4-hour-long discussions about whether or not a pre-op transgender person that calls himself a woman but still has a penis can be a part of a women's self-defense class, and how the fact that this woman who still has a penis would trigger somebody else in the class during an exercise where they're sitting on top of this person. I mean, it was, those kinds of discussions were just mind-boggling and frustrating, and you know, it got into such a minutia where I think we found ourselves sometimes like caretaking the community rather than let people kind of define their own terms.
When you start an organization that's about self-defense and raising awareness and money for self-defense, at some point you don't go, okay, this is just a women's organization, without a lot of discussion and argument. And I was of the mind that I did not want to exclude people from self-defense that was affordable because nobody else was doing it. And if you were a woman who didn't want to take a class with a man, there were classes over here you didn't have to. So I just didn't understand why it had to be one or the other. Why couldn't it be both?
Everybody that, you know, it might be an anarchist to an independent to a Democrat to a Republican. I mean, in the end, violence, it crosses all boundaries. It doesn't matter if you're wealthy, it doesn't matter if you're poor, it doesn't matter if you're gay, it doesn't matter if you're straight. And so I think as a self-defense organization, many of us felt strongly that we needed to keep that first and foremost, that violence permeates everybody.
Everybody certainly acknowledges that violence can be exercised on men, and men are victims of violence as well, and of all sorts. I never pursued opening things up to men, in part because I felt like we couldn't be all things to all people, especially right off the bat. A female friend of ours being raped and murdered, and to me it was natural that it was our initial focus. And unfortunately, when that happens, you know, it's very common that some people then view you, if you're pro-woman, as necessarily being anti-man, and it wasn't the case in the least.
I think the things that we ended up disagreeing on were more like how to reach out to the community beyond our immediate music community, which some members of Home Alive felt was too homogeneous.
I think for some of us, the process of building Home Alive was also the process of becoming politicized, of finding different parts of our identities.
We're always constantly challenging ourselves to figure out how we could be more inclusive or more aware or more sensitive or more accessible. And the longer you do it, the more you realize we are really accessible. And it's not a matter of changing and adapting what we do so much as becoming articulate and confident about what we do.
We weren't supposed to be there taking care of ourselves per se only. We were there because we had made a commitment to provide resources.
There were tensions and personal dramas going on between people, and hurt feelings, and there was a lot of love too. So it was very messy. It's very messy because, you know, we didn't know what we were doing.
That's where things kind of got difficult, and I think we were young and we had a lot of passion about what we were doing, but we didn't necessarily have a great communication skill down.
You know, that first meeting was, okay, we are going to start a nonprofit organization and it's going to do this. You know, it was very, we gotta do something.
And later on, as we started to take donations and realizing, especially if we were going to take them from more official organizations, we needed to get a nonprofit status. And so I worked with a volunteer attorney named Joe Reiner.
And I was one of the people that was very sincerely concerned about us making that move, and felt like, if my memory serves me, I felt like I probably drove it into the ground. I wanted a commitment from us as a collective that if we made this move, we would do it so carefully because it mattered.
So somewhere in that process, the mission statement was born.
When you are just beginning, you're like, we've got this mission statement, that's the thing that holds you all together, right?
Home Alive is a collective of performance and visual artists and other freaks hell-bent on fighting all forms of violence, including rape, domestic abuse, gay lesbian bashing, racism, and all forms of oppression. We support people choosing any form of self-defense that is necessary to survive in any given situation. Examples of self-defense are verbal boundary setting, walking friends to cars or houses, locking doors, planning escape routes, de-escalation techniques, using pepper spray, physical striking techniques, fighting, yelling, martial arts, knives, guns, other weapons, anything that keeps us alive. Since the brutal rape and murder of Mia Zapata on July 7, 1993, we are dedicated to presenting an ongoing series of high-intensity music, art, theater, film, and video events that raise money to provide our community with free or affordable self-defense workshops, educational material, resource information, and a nagging reminder that none of us are safe.
It's an overarching thing that we could all hold on to enough, right? Like everybody didn't have to totally 100% like, this is how I would say it, but there was enough like, yeah, this is it. We can move forward now. And that it reflected a lot of raw pain. And I think it reflected a lot of anger and a lot of commitment to, we are not going to collapse into fear.
There was a spotlight on Seattle in the moment too. This by no means belittles anything about what happened in the horrors that Mia suffered and in what we did in Home Alive. But what happened to Mia happens all the time, all over the place. And because there was a spotlight on Seattle, I think that is significant to the fact of like some of what was going on and our ability to work within that music scene.
The Seattle scene at that time was so diverse, and there was like these bands that had huge amounts of success, the big bands, and then there was the baby bands. They're, to me, a natural example of why that community was so unique at that time and why we were so lucky is because there was that sharing of resource.
All of a sudden, there was a huge amount of capacity and resources and people and bands that had connections and were really wanting to support Home Alive. And so there was just a tremendous amount of energy. There was also the people and bands that were organizing around the investigation fund. And you will read that had a whole lot of support. And there was a little bit of crossover, there was some tension.
Well, we were trying to raise money to hire a private investigator because the police weren't doing anything. It was $85 an hour, $100 an hour. We interviewed a bunch of people and finally chose a woman to do it, Lee Heron, and she put a lot of hours and a lot of effort into it. And it cost thousands and thousands of dollars.
It became a two-pronged thing. It was one, to raise money for Home Alive, and then two, to raise money for a private investigator to find the person who murdered Mia. And so we tried to help the Gits with that.
The list of bands that played benefits is longer than anyone knows. If I name them, there's probably at least one band that anyone watching this movie would know. Let's start with Blonde, Redhead, Yo La Tengo, and Sonic Youth, Exene Cervenka from X, Joan Jett, Hootie and the Blowfish, and the Indigo Girls. There must be a list of 100 bands.
We all got burnt out on benefits. There was a point where it was okay, there's not enough benefit, and they start to lose their ability to do what they set out to do if you saturate the area too much with them.
My band was on a record label. Bill Gallagher was the owner of the record label, and he had an idea to put out a record. It was just another one of a million things that people from the community were bringing. And so Valerie and Dave Meinert and I started collecting music. We said, hey, let's kind of head that, because that's kind of what we did. It's if you got excited about an idea, you would just go with it.
I remember sitting in someone's living room. I don't remember where we were, but it was all collective members, and it was so small. We were cramped in there with our legs crossed, and we could barely move, and we sat and listened to dozens and dozens and dozens of songs and spoken word pieces, and it was basically listen to it, yay, nay, put it in the good pile, then we go back and re-listen and re-listen and re-listen, and it was, every song was selected with consensus.
I think Valerie, had some communication with Eddie. He contacted us and said, Pearl Jam wants to put a song on the record, and all of a sudden it was our little Crunch Melody record CD with maybe 10 songs on it is all of a sudden oh my God, Pearl Jam might be on it. But then when we investigated with clearing that kind of thing, Sony was no, well, we want to put the record out. And then there was other interests, Soundgarden wanted to be on the record. and Chris Novoselic was working with Jam Pack, and so we said, we want to put a song on the record. Because, Nirvana did a benefit record for the Miazapata Investigative Fund. So we were in a bidding war with A&M, Geffen, and Sony all of a sudden, like, what?
We didn't just have a CD, we had a Sony CD. And the prospect of that was thrilling, and it threw us into a set of questions that as the organization that we understood ourselves, we had to answer. How do we hold on to the integrity of the meaning of what we were doing and the meaning of it as a direct response to the murder of a woman that was close in many of the people's lives who were doing the work? How do we hold on to the realness?
It was like a crazy roller coaster ride, and we didn't really know what we were doing. Valerie and I were constantly going back to the collective and telling them everything that was going on, and we said that we would only do this record if we kept control of everything. We were never giving up our control of this project. And we ended up going with Sony because they said, here's $250,000. And we thought, wow, that's a lot of self-defense classes.
Our mission was to make self-defense affordable and accessible to as many people as we could. And so that meant we needed to be funded so that people did not have to pay us to take classes.
So it ended up being a double record. Stacy and Jessica were in charge of the artwork, and Sony did not like it because it wasn't commercial enough. It was beautiful, but it wasn't their idea of like what would sell. And we said, well, tough, we're doing it anyway.
And there was nobody ever from Sony or from any multinational corporation telling us what to do.
We lived in a community where you didn't do business with large corporations. That was a sellout.
We got a huge donation from them, which allowed us to actually create a different kind of infrastructure for the organization to do some more work. So in a sense, we were able to use the industry to infuse us with cash that we needed to then go and do the grassroots kind of work that we wanted to do.
Because I was always kind of like, fuck the man. But I thought, if you can take the resources that are being offered from a major corporation, namely their money, and do good things with it, and they're not really asking anything in return, where's the sellout?
And first, we're going to head to Seattle. That's right, because Seattle is like the birthplace of a CD called Home Alive, and it should be out in stores this week. All the great Seattle bands came together for this, guys, and it benefits a violence prevention program.
So there's a happy ending. Go out and take that corporate money and everything's good. Like, that isn't my conclusion to it. But it was an interesting lesson to learn that possibility.
A woman who was at Sony, Michelle Anthony, she was the vice president, she completely believed in Home Alive. I mean, this was a woman who just really wanted to help us because we didn't listen to them. And they wanted to do this, that, and the other thing, and we said, no fucking way. And they didn't really promote the record. But that's the way it goes. You make decisions and then there's a cause and effect. But I feel good about that project.
We got so much press and so much support from that album coming out, and always grateful to Sony for that.
Still to this day, I think it's one of the most beautiful packages I've seen. That kind of coming together of the music, the message, resource information, art. There's really a lot packed into this very small package.
In those days, I mean, the internet was not up and running in any form of existence like it is now. And so that CD and the media that corresponded with it helped our tentacles kind of reach out. And there were people that came to our organization, and there's a Mia in every town. There's some young woman or young man that's been murdered without reason and has shaken a community to its core. And so that CD really connected with a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, regardless of where they were in the world.
And I think people shared stories with us that they had never shared with anybody. And not just people who were survivors of violence, but also their partners. Men were writing to us, and my girlfriend was raped by her father, and she doesn't have anybody to talk to about this, and what do I do? A lot of young people, 14, 15, 16-year-olds saying, this happened to me. Now I know that I have a voice, and I have a way to protect myself and make sure that this doesn't happen again. People sent us song lyrics and art and poetry, and it was quite amazing.
I remember those letters coming in and volunteers like responding to them and people asking like, how do you do it? We want to be Home Alive in, Bangkok. And we were like, no, that's great. We're flattered, but you really need to figure out what your resources are in your community and figure out how to do that. And we will help you in whatever way we can.
We're trying to create Home Alive chapters all over the world. Like if you do want to do something in your community, we're certainly happy to share our resources, but we're not trying to have a Home Alive chapter here and a Home Alive chapter here and a Home Alive chapter there.
The CD was an incredible vehicle for expanding the notion of Home Alive. This grassroots organizing and kind of taking back your community and taking control of our own safety.
Community and nonprofits, it's a hell of a life. You're just constantly seeking out money to cover not only your basic operating expenses, but to try and grow the organization.
There were moments when I think things kind of stabilized for a little while, but given tension between being a growing organization, trying to grow and step into that growth, as well as how do you stabilize, professionalize, negotiate grants and funding sources while also really holding on to this commitment to community and social justice.
There's that differentiation when an organization started by artists, and in order to really survive and become sustainable, there needs to be that logical, business-minded, linear component introduced.
There had been a lot of formal organization and structuring of the nonprofit organization, and the original founders had really solidified how it was going to be run. And so I came on, which was kind of unusual as a job. So I was hired as an office manager.
I think Chanel was she was like this bridge, I think, between moving out of collective kind of punk rock to like holding on to that and wanting to professionalize enough to be able to move forward in this way, but still hold on to these things.
And I believe I was the first one of the so-called founding 9 members that left. So that would have been in 1997. I left in part because I have a pretty low tolerance for processing.
And for a while, I stayed on the auxiliary board, and I was trying to like fly up for meetings and stuff like that, but that wasn't sustainable.
When I left and moved to Chicago, it wasn't the kind of organization that you can really keep your hand in the pot.
I was also, pretty tired, always going to meetings and, having this big responsibility. It was exhausting, always trying to reinvent the wheel.
I think one of the things that's amazing about Home Alive and its arc of time and all of the people who contributed to it is that it makes sense for new people to come in and look at things differently and do things differently.
But Christiane Storm in particular really kept it going. She was sort of the bridge between the original founding members and self-defense instructors and organizers who came after.
I was trained by Christiane and Chanel, that kind of cohort, but I think that we kind of stepped a little bit farther away from the roots. Each group brought in a different kind of flavor, but also lost touch a little bit from where Home Alive started, a little bit.
The Home Alive is the child that the collective birthed, and you have this vision for what you want your child to be, and they become their own individuated selves.
My background isn't in music. It wasn't from like some punk scene. It wasn't like, because I get a lot of people are like, oh, do you know the song? It's the Gits. I'm like, oh God, I should know it.
It took more than a decade to bring Jesus Mezquia to justice, more than a decade to find him guilty of murdering local blues punk singer Mia Zapata, and the miracle of DNA technology that matched some of his saliva with that found in a bite wound on Zapata's body. Evidence that proved Mezquia beat, raped, and strangled the singer with the cords of her sweatshirt in July of 1993.
10 years after Mia had been murdered, we'd all basically given up hope, which is very sad. It was heartbreaking. But after 10 years, you just don't really expect that anything is going to change.
It's never enough. It's not gonna. can't take back what he did, you know. But I'm glad that it ended that way. I'm glad that we found out, because I often say closure. That's also one of those words you're like, what the hell does that mean? Yeah, I could stop thinking about who it was. That was good. Never stop figuring out why he did it.
It was sort of ironic that, we had spent so much time in Home Alive in our self-defense classes trying to debunk this myth of the stranger and also the racist narrative that is often surrounding stranger attacks, particularly with white women. We worked to dispel that myth. It's often somebody it's often somebody in your community. And here, we had to come face to face with the fact that this was an individual who fit that stereotype. But in some ways, it doesn't change what we were trying to do.
You know, people say, oh, well, but it's the good thing that came out of Mia's murder. And it's like, nothing good came out of it, you know? I mean, nothing good comes out of something like that. Maybe inspiration. I think that Home Alive in general unified the entire arts community in that town and politicized the arts community.
One of the threads for me of being involved in Home Alive has consistently been around how do you respond to violence in a moment, right? Whether that's a physical assault, how do you respond to a friend calling and saying like my partner hit me, or there's been a hate crime, or just violence, like in the myriad of things that could be. What do you do when shit happens? You know, how do you respond in a way that allows us to honor that, heal, move through it, and continue to grow in a way that just deepens resiliency?
I think there's a lot of lessons in Home Alive. Not only the ones that we intentionally put forth, but also in learning about organization and community building. And it's funny, when I say there are lessons to be learned, it sounds like, oh, people would look at our experience and feel like they came away with an understanding of how not to do things, or how to do things. Maybe it's being very egotistical to think that people could learn from our experience.
One of the things that I love about the organization is how it was such a defining moment in that moment of time. Like, it really captured Seattle, and it really captured these women, and for me it really captured kind of where, in this way, feminism had come from so many people doing so much work. And at the same time, I love how this was one star in a big constellation of other stars where people were doing a lot of work all over the place.
The interesting thing isn't to put it up on a shelf and look at how cool it is. The interesting thing is that it's a resource for all of us in terms of looking at how we can work for change.
If this is gonna work for you, take it, do it, organize.
I wish that it had never had to exist. I wish that there wasn't that need for it, but, and I wish that Mia was still here. But we've lost other people that way, and there's lots of women getting abused and killed, and violence happening to lots of people all the time. So I know that that's a ongoing reality for humanity, but I think that our little answer to it in our little corner of the world at that time was satisfying.
I guess I just feel really grateful to the founders of Home Alive, and I don't know if they really know the extent of their influence on the community, and it just reverberates out, the effect. And I think it teaches people that you can take things into your own hands. It's about more than just personal things. It's about whole communities, and it's about oppression, and it's about liberation, and just making the world a safer place for everybody.
I always kind of forget that people outside of Seattle know about it sometimes, because I'll see something or I'll hear something or I'll see it, like a shirt, you know, like a 15-year-old t-shirt somewhere random when I'm, you know, not even in Seattle, not even in the state. And I'll think, oh, wow, you know, it's here too. You know, somebody, it got somebody, even if that's like somebody's aunt's hand-me-down t-shirt that they're wearing, you know, somebody got touched and communicated it, you know, and somebody said, hey, what's this t-shirt for? And, you know, it'll always be there, you know, it's sitting in people's CD collections now. Hey, what's this? Oh, let me tell you about that.